Create and deploy full stack application from scratch. Set up the continuous integration and continuous deployment, and learn about the unit test and ESLint setup and all. Sounds interesting? Hello everyone, welcome to Full Stack JS channel. In this video, we will create a to-do application using Angular and Material and use Firebase for storing the data and for hosting the application. We will also use Firebase for the authentication, and we will also be using Github Actions for the continuous integration and continuous deployment setup. Why do we need another to-do application? To-do application make it easy to understand the concepts. As we are building from scratch, you will learn about all the steps required for creating a full stack application using Angular and Firebase, and we will also learn all the different other concepts also. So you will get a full idea of how a full stack application should work. So let's get started. So I've taken this to-do app challenge from Frontend Mentor. So they provide the basic designs and styles and all. So you can see they're providing themes from like mobile design is there. You can see the desktop themes. It has actually two different themes are there. There's a dark theme, there's a white theme, and so you can even change the themes and all. So I've downloaded this one, and let's see the final application, how what we'll be building. So I added authentication as an extra feature which is not there in the original one to show the full stack features, and there is a login with the Google also option is also there. And once you log in, you can basically create a to-do, and you can see also how many to-dos are remaining, which is open, which is yet to be completed. Once you add that, we can actually filter the to-dos. You can set the to-dos as completed, and you can see by its checkbox which is completed and all. And also you can remove the completed items, and also you can change the theme. So if there is a dark theme and white theme, you can change it, and you can log out and normal social logins. So you can see email based login is there, and Google based login is there. So it's all stored in the backend, so that for each user it will be different to-dos will be there. This is what we'll be building. So let's see that how we are building that. Let's look at all the features which we'll be building. So one main function is we want authentication, and we want two types of authentication: email based authentication and also the Google social authentication, right? And another next feature is we want to add the to-do. We want to get all the to-dos for a particular user, and we want to delete a particular to-do, and we want filter based on whether it is completed, whether it is not completed and all. So we want to change, and also we want to change the theme between a dark theme and a white theme. Now what is the approach we can take? So this is a very simple application. We don't have too much data also, and we are looking for something which is cheaper option as well, right? And we are focusing on a single page application right now because it's just for that single user. So it will be, we can just go with a very simple approach of a single page application. So let's look at the high level design. What we'll be focusing in. So now that we are planning to use a single page application, we can use either of the single page framework. We have selected Angular, and for the backend we have selected Firebase, and Firebase has a Firebase authentication which they give for free for limited users, and for the backend storing the data we have the Firestore option. That is where we'll be storing all the to-dos and all. So that is what we'll be going to do with. So let's start with building the application. We'll first do the Angular setup. So if you go to the docs, and if you go to the setup, so the first thing we want to do is we want to install the Angular CLI, which will basically generate the complete Angular setup for us, or the Angular folder and the files for us, right? So it's a global installation, so that you can see npm install -g and with Angular CLI. So I'm using a Mac terminal, so I need to use sudo also because it needs elevated permission. But I've already done this one. So I've already installed the application. So if you see, once you install, you will get an ng command. So if you see the ng version which I am trying, you can see it's version 14. So it's already installed. Once you install, you will get like this. And this is the latest version also, right? So now that we have installed, now how do we create a new application? So if you come down, you can see there is an ng new my app. So it will generate a folder with my app. So we'll just do the same thing, Ingenue, and we'll name it as maybe um, Angular Firebase Todo, which will basically will ask us some questions actually. So do we need routing? Yes, because we have a login page and we have the home page where we'll be adding all the to-dos. So we'll keep it as well. And we'll use the SCSS because we'll need some custom themes. We have dark and white theme, right? So we'll use that one. Now the installation has started. Let's wait for that installation to complete. Okay, now that it is installed successfully, now we can do is we can just cd to that folder, and then if you do an npm start, it will start the Angular application. You can see it is doing the ngserve, which internally is doing when we do npm start. So once the application is started, it will be available on the port 4200. So you can see the localhost 4200. This is the default setup, right? So we can see the application is running successfully. Now let's see the code. So app component.html, these are the default the HTML structure which they are adding. We don't need any of this. We'll just keep the router outlet because we have two routes, so we'll just keep for that. If you see the functionality what we want to build, we have a top level head to do header is there, and a theme changer is there. Then we have the add to do section is there. Then we have the to dos where we'll be displaying all the to dos and we can show the to dos and filtering, all those things are there. So this is the basic layout which we want to create, right? So for that means first thing is we have two pages are there, login page and the home page, right? So what we'll do is we'll create two components, one for the home page and one for the login page. So this is the Angular CLI command for generating the component. So we have created two components now, which will automatically create the component, and to the app module, if you see, it has added this components in under the declaration. Now we'll move the same thing to the routing so that we can add the route for that. First we'll add a route for the login. So we'll keep the URL as login itself, and the component will use the login component. And home page will keep the default URL, so we don't need any extra URL, we'll just keep it as empty. But since it is an empty URL, we use the path match also, which is to be full to make sure it is correctly matching, and we'll use the home component for that. Now we'll just add some basic layout. So into the app component HTML, so maybe we can add a the top level. So we have the header section and we have the main section, right? So we'll add it in a container. Let's add some header maybe, and then we'll add some the main section. So we'll keep that outlet in the main section, and maybe in the header we can add some uh, link for the login page, right? So that we can just test it out whether the routing is working or not. So the router link is a directive given by the Angular router, so that it will create the link to the particular page. Okay, now let's test it out. So we'll do the npm start again. Okay, so it is starting the application. Now if you see, it's not yet started. Okay, now let's see. Okay, so now you can see the login page is there. Login click, if it is redirected to the login page. That means that functionality is working fine. We will be utilizing Angular material for our UI layout. So if you go to material.angular, so we can see, to get started, we can see there is a installation setup is given actually. So Angular already is having an ng option is for the Angular CLI. So we'll just utilize that one. So we'll just open a VS Code terminal so that we can run this command. So this ng-add command will basically add the basic setup requirements for the Angular CLI. So it will ask some questions and all, so that it knows what to add and all. So first thing is Angular material we need to install, yes, and we need to install which theme. So what we'll use is we'll use a custom theme, right? Because we want to use around some dark and white theme, so we'll just use a custom. typography, yes, and yes, include animations. So it will basically update the packages and it will update app module with the Angular animation module and all, and material module also. Now that these packages are installed successfully, so let's see the changes, what all things it has made. So if it is the app module, it has added the browser animation module. We have selected that one. Styles.css has all this theming information and also the basic styles it is added. And in the HTML file, it has added the font, right? So this is a robot font, material fonts it is added, and the material icons also it is added. Okay, now what we'll do is for basic styles and all for the themes, we'll move all these theme related to the separate theme file. So I'm using in CSS partial, so that's why I'm using and starting with the name underscore CSS theme CSS, and I'm just let's copy all the theme related stuff to this one. So I'm just moving all this so that the styles.css will become a bit more cleaner. Okay, so the same thing I'm just moving to a separate one. So we can see that already there is a light theme is being created, right? So what we'll do is we'll create a copy of this and we'll make it as a dark theme. So material is providing different functions, SAS functions for defining light and dark themes. So we'll create one light theme and we'll create one dark theme, and we'll just use the different dark theme function for creating that. What we'll do is for the dark theme we'll use a different class name. So if the document body has this class, then we will apply this dark theme. Otherwise we'll by default apply the light theme. So that's how we'll go. Later we'll see how to change this theme and all. For now we'll just do the setup only. Okay, now let's start the application again. Okay, so one thing I missed is here is I haven't imported the theme file actually. So like we just created the theme file but we didn't import, so that it won't be initialized, right? So we'll just import the theme file. By importing that, all the theme related stuff we moved there, it also will be included in the while the application is starting. Okay, now that application started, let's see the application. Okay, so you can see the font is changing a little bit, the styling is changing a little bit actually. So if you see the font here, you can see the robot font is added. So that means the material has applied successfully. You can see the matte typography class is being added. So it is added. Now let's try out with some any one of the components so that we can see whether the functionality, whether it is working fine or not. We can add a simple card maybe. How do we add that? So we'll just use the first thing is card module. So you just have to go to the app module and we'll import that, and we just have to add the card. So we'll just try it out for the first actually to see whether it is working fine or not. Now if you see the page, you can see there will be let's go to the home page. There will be some extra border we can see. That means the card is added successfully. So our setup is good. Now we will do our Firebase setup. So if we'll go to the console, that is where we'll be starting up. So it automatically logged in with my Google account. So once you go to the Firebase console, so let's get started by creating a project. So we can just give some name, like since our creating to do, we'll just give us a to do and we'll just accept the terms and then we'll continue. We don't need analytics for now, so we'll just create the project. So we'll just wait for it to complete. Once it is completed, now so there are three options, like there is an Android, iOS, and also the web options are there. So we are just creating web, so we'll just click on the web, we'll register the app on web, we'll just give some name, and the hosting part we'll do later, so if we can skip that for now. We'll just register there. So this will give us a Firebase configuration. So this is what we want. So this is the project information. This is what we want. We'll take this actually, and what we'll do is we'll take this to our project. We'll keep it in our environment file. So we have an environment for production. We have an environment for the dev. So we'll just paste this data, and then we'll attach to the environment object. Right. Now if we continue, so now our setup is created. Now what we need is we need the database to be created to store our to-do items, right? So to store the data, we have the Firestore is available. So we'll create a new database on the Firestore. So for now we'll go with the test mode because we want to access it directly publicly, and so we'll just select some location, just fine for us. Now let's add the data. So we need basically to add a collection and to store the to-dos, and let's see what we need to store. So we need to have basically a description. We need to also store whether it is completed or not. We need to also store the user associated with it. So these are the three information we need to store, right? Now let's try to create that. So what we'll do is let's create a collection to-dos, and so what the first thing, so first IDs will auto generate, and the first thing is we'll have a title which can be a string, and which we will add some text. Second one is we'll add some boolean value to know whether the to-do is completed or not. So we'll add in is completed, and we'll make it as a boolean. So the third one is we need to add for a user. So we'll add a user ID so that user ID can be mapped to the current user, whoever is user, right? It can be also, we can even add a reference to the user collection. That is another way to store the same information. Here we'll be just storing user ID as a string, which is an ID. So now we can see that this collection is created and the document is also got added here. Now to integrate Firebase with Angular, we have the Angular Firestore. So Angular Firestore, so setting up, first thing is we have an ngAdd option is provided by the Angular Fire. So we can just use that. So I will just create a new terminal, and we'll just try this command ngAdd this. So what this will do is it will add the basic setups, what all that is required. It will install the packages and all. Okay, so it's asking for that Angular Fire to be installed or not. Yes, we will install that. And also what it will do is it will install the Firebase CLI. Firebase CLI is required for if you want to basically deploy from your command line, or if you want to do any other things, any Firebase command you want to do from your command line, you need to have the Firebase CLI installed. You can install in multiple ways. There is an npm option is also there, which is a global installation. So this also will be tried by this ngAdd method, which we are trying now. Okay, so it's installing the packages. So if we go to the packages, and we can see that there is an Angular Fire is being added. That is the one which got added now. Okay, now the packages are installed. Let's select the which all options we want. We want the hosting, we want the authentication, we want the Firestore option. I think these three only we need for now, right? So we'll go with that. So I've selected all these three, and then again now it's trying to install the Firebase tool. But the problem here is Firebase tools requires an elevated permission, so it is not able to install, which is fine for us now because we don't want to install it now. For us functionality to work with, I think this is more than enough, right? So we'll leave that in the setup. Now okay, now what we'll do is we'll look at all the steps which are let's see what all steps are there. We'll look at that and we'll try to do that. Okay, first thing we already did in Angular Fire, and Firebase configuration we need. Firebase configuration in the last step we already copied that and we have set up already, so that is already there. The third step is we need to add the Angular Fire module in the app module. So we'll go to the app module and we'll add the Fire module. So in the Angular Fire module, so we'll choose from the same Firebase value which we already added, so that we will be utilizing that. So I'm just importing that environment file and then we'll use it. The next option is what we need is we need the Fire store also, because that is where we have stored our data, right? If you want other things we can use it, but for now we are using only that. So we'll just add the Fire store module also. Right. Now what we'll do is, now we can try that in our one of the components. We'll try to see whether we are able to get the data or not. So we can, so right now we can just go to some component. Let's add the home component. That is where we want to display the to do. We'll just import the Angular Fire store. So what we're doing is a dependency injection. So we'll do the dependency injection for the Fire store, Angular Fire store, and then the items. So basically we'll be reading from the Fire store and then we'll associate that with an observable. So it's an RxJS observable. So observable comes from RxJS. So we need to import observable also. Okay. Now we'll just follow the same code what they have written. So I think it's basically Firestore. From the Firestore we'll mention which collection. In our case the collection name is Todos. So Todos and then value change. So what happens is whenever any data changes in, it will be updated to the items. So items is an observer which listens for the data changes, right? Now what we'll do is we'll just display the data. We'll just copy that code here, which basically is just I think items is the same name. So we'll just, and async pipe is already added, so it's an observable, and title is a property. So we'll just add that. And what I will do is, normally the naming convention is putting a dollar at the end of the observable. So I'll just follow that same naming convention. It is not mandatory, but it's a good practice. Okay, now let's try to see whether this functionality completely is working fine or not. So the application is running fine. Now if we go back to the browser, we can see that already that to do is already there. This is the one which we created earlier. Now let's go and try to change the data to see whether it is live updating or not. So we'll try to change this to something else. Yeah, updated, change or something like that. And now if you go back, you can see that the data is already changed. So that means our data, it is working fine. Now let's add the authentication. Adding authentication in Firebase is very simple. There are a lot of providers are available. Along with the email and password. So we'll just use the Google, and to enable that, we just have to enable there is an enable option on the top. We just have to enable it, which will add this one. We just have to select an email for which is support mail or the admin mail, right? And we will save that. Once you have set up in Firebase, now we need to enable the same thing in Angular. So we'll use the Angular Fire for that. In Angular Fire, let's go to the docs and see. So if you go to the auth, getting started, if you see there is an Angular Fire auth we need to import. So that's the service we'll be using. So let's go to the login component and add that. And also we need the Firebase basically to set the basic type auth provider, and we'll be injecting the Fire auth service. We'll just copy the same code. So basically the login. So here we are using the example is providing the Google provider, right? So like that, for every provider there is a method available, and let's use the same template also. So this is having an if else block. If block, if the user is logged in, will show the first block. If the user is not logged in, will show the else block. Okay, now let's see the application and see whether it is working or not. Okay, now that let's go to login page. You can see that login with Google is showing. It is showing the pop-up, and then once I logged in, you can see that my name is showing up. So that means that functionality is working fine. Let's add some initial layout. So let's look at the design, what they have provided. So if you look at it, there's a header section which has some background and which has a top title and then the theme switcher and all. Then next to that we have the art to do section, right? So that is a separate box actually, and then below we have all the to items and where on which also in the footer we have the filters and how many items are left. So how do we divide each component? So we can have a art to do component, one thing. So we can have, and the top all the sections can be added on the header section, right? Um, and we can even remove, spread it further. Let's do this one and look at the design. This is what the provided by the front end vendor. So mobile specification 375 pixel and desktop is 144 pixel, and we have given some colors as well and some theme specifications also, and the font size and family they have provided. So let's start with that. So this font is a Google font. So what we can do is we can add the same way how the Roboto font is added. Just you create a download the same font, Joseph Sans, and we will put that as the body font family. So in the body, we'll just add the, currently it is added as Roboto. We'll just add the font size is 18 pixel we have set up. So this is added to the root element so that we can use the REM for the remaining all elements. Okay, now let's add the some basic structure we were decided. So we have the container, we have the header section, and we have the main section, right? The header section can go to a separate component. We can move it into a header component. And the front-end vendor has already provided all these images. So I've downloaded that and I moved that to the assets folder in the Angular application. So if you move to assets folder, it will be directly accessible via the URL. So we actually have to give different images based on the theme, right? So and also for mobile and desktop. For now, I'll just use one image, and later we'll do the change for changing images and all. I'll just select one image and we'll add this a background image for the body. So the URL for that will be like asset slash, since I put it in the images folder, it will be images, and then we'll be giving the file name. And the same way, we have to give a different image for the mobile. And mobile, we have seen that the max width given for that one, the mobile specification is given, and max width given that for is 375 pixels. So for that, till that much, we'll use a different background image. I'm using light as a default theme because later we changed that to the dark theme, so we can use a, at that time we can use the different. So the default theme we are selecting as a light one. So now I've used the media query for having a different image for the mobile view. Now let's also add a background repeat. So we don't want to repeat it, so I'll just make it as a no repeat. And box sizing, I'm setting border box so that the content will be staying within margin and padding. It won't affect that. And now if you see, there is a background image is being shown. Okay, that is good. Now what we want is we want to add the more layout. So we want to make it basically on the center. The content has to be on the center. So I want to put it on the top root level element. So that's why I'm using a host selector. So it will select the app root element, and that I'm making a display flex, and so that it will come to the content of this will be coming to the center, which is basically the app component.html. What are we added in app component.html? Now I'm adding a header component. So we can move all the things on the top level. We will move to that separate header component. We'll also add the to-do section. That box, one side box, will move to a separate component. For that, we will create the add to-do component as well. So in this header component HTML, we'll move the content from the top level section, right? So that means whatever we have added in the app component, we can move it in here. Okay, we have a to-do, we have a theme switcher. I will add this into the app component HTML. Instead of this header, we'll be using that in the app component HTML. So anything header related stuff is now moved to the header component. Now since now that is separately moved, so that becomes the app component became a bit more cleaner in that way, and it's also central aligned. So we still have to improve that style a lot, but at least the initial layout is done. We'll adjust the width a little bit so that it will match. You can see that it is taking a like 1/3 of the size total, right? And in mobile it is taking the full width, so almost the full width except the padding. So we'll try to add that with the media queries. So what we'll do is we'll just so we have the top level, which is the container, right? Container div we added with the container. So we'll just add um, to that container. What we'll do is we'll add a will again. So basically what we want is we want to make it as we have to give a width, but the thing is this width we want is like it should not be like so it cannot go more than this much, right? So we want some kind of a limit also we want to set. So for that what we can utilize is we can utilize a min function in CSS. So what it will do is a minimum of what, like I mean, so let's say we want at least a minimum of 375 pixel, but uh, if the width is not even that much, then try to take the other one, or let's say 500 pixel will go. So it will, what it will do is it will try to go to the 500 pixel. If it is not even that much, then it will try to take the maximum, which is 90%. Why we do that is because something which is not matching within this mobile screen and the desktop, it should not be like congested, so it should have enough space. So that's why we are utilizing this min option. I'm just adding a padding, and I'm using REM. We have given a fixed font size to the HTML, so I'm using REM. And for the mobile, we are just making it as a width as 100%, so it will always be 100%, right? So here you can see that it is taking up 500 pixel because it has enough space, right? Let's add the add to do component now. So what we need for the add to do? So basically we need a card component the same way like a box, right? And we need a text box, and on the left side we can see there is a small radio button. So that's what we need for the art to do. So let's start creating that. So first we need a card and card module we already added. So we'll just use the same format. We'll just use a mat card. Now we need a radio button. So we'll try to add the radio button also. So we'll try to use the radio button module, mat radio module. We'll add in the app module. Let's try some sample example of. So here we don't need a value. We don't care about the value. We just want to show a radio button. The value we are not taking. So we'll just simply make it as a value. We'll remove. Just to simply make it as an empty radio button. Okay, it's not showing. So we are seeing upload and header main. Okay, so we haven't added the add to do component to the home component. So we'll take the tag and add that to the home component HTML. We'll add it above this card. Okay, now let's see how it is. Okay, it is showing up the card, but there is no gap in between. So it looks like a single one, right? Maybe we can add some space in between. So mat card tag, for the mat card tag, let's add some margin and maybe some 1 rem or maybe some 0.5 rem or something. We'll try to add some spacing. We'll try to add in between. Yeah. So now there is a gap also, and it is showing up perfectly. That is good. Now we need a input. That's the next one, right? So we'll look for the input component. Input component, again we'll add the mat input module. So we'll go to the app module and add the mat input module. And let's look at some example how they are running. So we'll look at, so what we need is a very simple one. So there are multiple options, either the placeholder going up or simply showing some error message. There are multiple options are there possible. I think for us in this case we just need a very plain simple one. So what it does is it just starts an mat input directive to the input, right? An attribute. So we'll just create an input and add this mat input. Now how do we so what is the functionality we need to achieve here? So user types something, and on pressing enter we want to add that item to the to do. Okay, so we are able to type, and now on press enter we want to enter the item. So there is an event given by Angular keyup.enter, and I think we can utilize that. So in that we will just add a method. So let's create a method, add to do, something like that we'll add. Now this add to do will call on keyup.enter. So whenever users presses enter, this will be called. Now we need to pass the value of the input also. So let's add some reference. So we'll give some name so that we can pass the value. So let's say it's add to do element, and this will pass the input add input dot value to the event, which is a string value. Let's put a console and see how it is displaying. Now if I type and press enter, yeah, you can see that ABC is showing up in the console. So that means that event is working fine. Now we need to, how do we add that to the Firebase, right? So let's look at the docs. So if you go to the docs, so docs for Auth, analytics, deploy, and what we need is for the Firestore, right? Yeah, so there is a Firestore, and collection. So here, if you see, we are here, it is creating collection, and yes, we can see the item collection dot add. So we can create a Firestore collection and we can add to that, right? So what we'll do is we'll just follow the same thing. We'll first inject the Firestore. Let's take that. Try to import that. I think it added an extra Firestore. So let's see if they are adding Fire Combat Firestore. So I think we can remove the last Firestore. Yeah. Now, what is the next step they are doing? So basically, they are creating a collection, right? Collection property. So let's create a property the same way. So we'll make it as Todos collection. So it is an Angular first collection, so we can import from the same package. And of type item. So there, we don't have an item. What we have is a to do. So let's create a model so that we can define the value. We can define the structure of the to do. Let's create a to do model. We'll add it as a type. It can be type or it can be interface. It doesn't matter. So what are there for to do? So we have, in our case, we have title, which is a string. We also have the is completed property, which is a boolean. What was the third item? For the user information, right? Let's look at the data, how we are storing. So we are storing it as a user ID, right? A user ID, and it is a string, which is nothing but the ID of the UID of that user. Now we will import this to do in our Firestore collection type. Okay, so now to do's collection we need to initialize. So we'll follow the same thing what they are doing. So in the constructor we'll say to do's collection is equal to Firestore AFS, basically Angular Firestore dot collection of. Here in this case it is of type to do, and we are calling the collection to do's. That is a name we have given for the collection. Now to add to the item, we just have Firestore collection dot add, and all the data we need to pass. So one is the title. Title is basically the input value. Now we need to, second thing we need to know is the authentication, like who is the current user. Then only we can get the user ID, right? So we'll follow the auth documents. We'll try to get the auth. We'll inject the auth Angular Fire auth. This will give us information about the current logged in user. Again here also, yeah, combat auth. We'll just follow that import. Now how do we get the current user? So I've seen one example. I think there are multiple options. One is we can say on auth state changed. There is an option I've seen, and also there is an dot user. I think that is also comes as an observable. Maybe we can try it out with something. So we can try this on auth state change. I think that we need to pass a function to it, and we can get that. There's a user also is there, which is an observable, and we can get that, but I am not exactly sure how we can utilize here or not. So maybe we can use the one auth dot changed. So here this will give us either a current user, or if the user is not logged in, then it will give null. So based on that we can see whether if we have a user or not. And in our case, so we'll create a model for the user also. so that we can store the value. So basically user will have just the UID. So we'll just create, let's add a model. We'll make the UID as a string. Okay, now we can give that as the type, and initially the value is undefined or null, right? So I will initialize it as a null. Now this user we are assigning so that we can use it in other functions. So we are just, whenever the auth state is changed, we are assigning to this dot user. Now we are ready to add to that to-dos collection. So if we have the value and if we have the user, then we can add to the to-dos collection. So is completed, we will set it as false by default, and we have the title which is of input value. I think user is this dot user, and yeah, title we will say input value, and user ID is this dot user dot UID. Okay, great. Now let's try to add something. Okay, so that got added and it is even reflecting in here. We can verify that by going to the Firestore. We can see that here now there's a new to-do is got added. So that means we were successfully able to add a new to-do from the UI. Now, even though we added the mat input, you can see that this input still doesn't look like a normal input, right? It didn't add the styles, and even the radio button style also we need to change a little bit because as per the design it looks a bit different, right? So for the mat input, it needs to be wrapped inside a form field, then only it will have that extra styles and features. It has to be a form field. So you can so we'll take this form field and we look at some examples how we can do. So we'll just first add the mat form field module. Mat input module we already added, so that's, we are good there. We just have to add mat form field also. Now we will wrap this inside the form field. We'll keep both the radio button as well as the input inside the mat form field. There are different types of appearances there. Appearance fill, appearance legacy is there. We'll go with the fill. We'll make it that radio button disabling because basically we don't need that there at all. It's just for a display purpose. Okay, now the thing is it has to be on the side. So here if you look like it is going like an upright, so it doesn't look right. So it has to be on side by side. So there is some option where we can make it also on the left side. If you see, let's look at the what all examples are there. I think this one you can see that symbol is showing on the left side, right? How does or even this amount, the dollar symbol which shows on the left side, I think that is good. So how we are getting is the mat prefix. So if you add a mat prefix, then it will be added as if like it is part of that input. Let's try to utilize that. Okay, now it is on the left side, so it is like both are on the same line, but it is not taking the full width actually. Okay, we can add a mat label also. We don't need any text or anything, so we can remove that. Let's try to put some width 100% and see whether the width is increasing or not. That's not increasing, so let's look at the styles. Let's inspect and see what is there actually say. So the problem happening here is, so since the styles are encapsulated, will not be able to style an inner element unless it is a global style. Then we can add that here, but we will not be able to get in that way. Let's try maybe adding the width of the card, but that increase the whole width actually, right? So it actually increase the total width also. Let's try to add a mat card, wrap it inside a mat card content. So there are mat card content, mat card footer, mat card actions, mat card title. All this we can add actually inside a mat card, so that it shows each section, and there will be some extra style can be added also. Maybe we'll try to put this to the mat form field. So adding to the input anyway didn't work, right? So let's try with this one. So we'll add to that class. We'll give a full width. Let's see. Okay, now it is full width actually. It is going to the fully, but there is some extra spacing comes up. Let's see from where that is coming. So that padding seems to be, so there seems to be some padding and seems to be coming from the mat card. So in this scenario we don't need a padding, so let's try to remove that. So we'll make it as padding 0. Okay, now that is good. So the line is completely extending, which is good. But next thing is we don't even need this line, right? So there is no line actually. There's no underline. But I think by default, inputs material input is adding that line. So let's try to see how we can remove. Okay, let's try to inspect and see what is adding that line. Okay, I can see mat from field wrapper, field flex, and there is an field underline. So that's mat from field underline. So the name itself is showing there's an underline. There is, I think it should be. Let's try to remove it and see. I'll just try to delete that element. Let's see. Okay, now you can see after deleting that element, that is gone. So we don't even need this element. But the problem is if I try to put the style here as, and maybe let's say put display none, this won't work again because of the encapsulation. It's an inner element that doesn't work in that way. But if you put it in a global style, then this can be, we can achieve that. The only issue is that this will be impacted across the application. Now I added in the main style.css. Now it is not visible anymore, right? Again, some extra padding is there on the bottom, which is added to the mat form field wrapper. Again, this also we can add it in a. Let's try that 5 pixel. No, that still doesn't work. So maybe we will try to add it in the. Again, we'll try to do the same thing. We'll put it in the global styles. Okay, so that seems to have reduced the padding. Okay, so I think our to do section, we have so some basic layout is achieved. Now, as part of authentication, we'll move all the authentication logic we have written to a separate service. We have to create the login page, and we need to add the email and password login as well, right? So let's see what are things. So we have taken up all the authentication related stuff, right? So we have in a header, we have something authentication related. App component, we have used some app component. We don't have. Let's see what are places we have used. Login component, we have used the auth. We have used. So the authentication or auth module is added in separate places. Here in add to do also we have used the auth module. So rather than splitting all this into separate, so it's a good idea to put that logic in a single place. So we'll create a service, an auth service will create. so that all this logic related to the authentication will be in one place. So now we will move all the sign in, all those related, we'll move there. So Angular Firestore Auth, Angular Auth, we'll move it here. What are methods we need? We need the login, right? So we need the sign in methods, and so right now what we have done is we have done with the sign in with Google. Now what we need to do is we also need to sign in with a email and password. So we'll create the method for both. Also we'll do the sign up also. Okay, so we need the Firebase as well. Let's move that Firebase also here. Now, I think here so instead of the Angular Fire Auth, what we can utilize is we can utilize now the Auth service. I'll keep it this for now. We'll remove it later. So Auth service will take, and now instead of this login, what we can do is we can say this dot auth service dot sign in with Google. So we can remove that. Same way for the sign out. So this same thing we can move it down here in the sign out, and we can just call the auth service.sign out. In same way in our to-do component, what we need the whenever the user is having a new value, even in signed out it will become null. If the user is logged in, it will have a value, right? So this is a good example for creating our own custom service. Sorry, custom observable, right? So we'll create a custom observable, so we can create a behavior subject. Behavior subject is a good way to um, make it as an observer and an observable, so we can um, get the value and we can produce the value also, right? So we'll basically it will be either a user or a null will be the type. So we'll create a behavior object with that, and initially we will initialize with a null value. So the behavior subject and subject differences, behavior subject needs an initial value. So it is mandatory so that everyone who is subscribed will immediately get the latest value. So we'll add an initialize method so that as soon as the application is loaded, we'll just call the so we'll try to see whether the user is already logged in or not. So since it is a behavior subject, this will be like stored this value so that the next whoever is subscribing as soon as that they will get the latest value. So if the user is already logged in, it will be just that value will be there. Now from the app component, maybe we can just call the initialize. So app component is a top level component, so that will be a good place to just call that initialization methods. So we'll inject the auth service, and we'll call the initialize. Okay, so now this user is available, so we can utilize this one instead of the auth.onAuth stage. We can rely on the auth service.user. So since it is a behavior subject, we can subscribe to the value and we'll be getting the same format. So we'll be getting as a user, which can be either a null or a user. So we'll give the type. Basically it is of type user or null, right? So we'll give the same type. Okay, so that means we don't need the Angular fire auth anymore. Now we can add the login component template. So we'll create basically an email based password. Also we need a Google login also, right? So we'll just follow some template available. Let's look at the form field. What we need is basically we need to show some error messages also. So we'll follow I think this looks good. Enter email and some error message also. We'll just follow the same thing. Let's make it as a card. The same thing what we did for the home page. We'll put it inside all the forms. We'll put it inside the man card content, and all the buttons we'll put it under the man card actions. So form field we already added the module, and input also we added a module, so we don't need any separate module. So I think the same way we will need one for password also. We can remove the placeholder. Input here it is. So we'll create a okay. So since it is a form, we will need a forms module also, because we are going to look at we are going to read the value from the form, right? So we need a form group. So for that we will need a forms module, reactive forms module we will need. Now we can create the custom form control, since now we have added the form module. So we'll create a form control, one for email and one for password we'll create. Okay, so we have added the validators also, so we can add so we'll just follow the same format whatever they have used. So it should be a password dot. So if either of this is invalid, so if it is a password, we know that it is nothing but we'll just hard code the value. So it is, we need the password, it is a required value, a minimum validation, right? And we'll add the same get error message we'll add, which is nothing but it is reading the form control value and checking whether any of the validation is failing or not. Let's add the buttons now. So we have the three buttons we need, right? We need one for sign in, one for sign up, and also one for the Google login. So for the button, I think we haven't added any button till now. So we need to add the button module also. And button module we will add. Now we will add so we'll just use some different colors so that it will just show differently. So it's basically we can use like you can use different color, primary, accent, and one same format we can use. So we need one for signing, one for sign up, and one for the Google. Now let's add the methods also for the same. So we have the login. So this is actually a Google login. So we'll make it as an explicitly as a login with Google itself so that it is more clear. And the normal login. So for the normal login, we'll just add a click handler. We'll call the login method. Same way for so we need a sign up also. So we'll create one sign up method. Yeah, sign out we don't need anymore right now in here. So when you click, we will this one will call sign up, and okay, so we'll add some basic validation. So basically, if the email is having a value and the password is having a value, then we will do the login. Same thing goes for the sign up. If both are some value, then only we will need to add that. Let's implement these methods in the auth service. So both sign in and sign up, what we'll be getting is nothing but email and password, right? So we'll just use sign up also for the same. And so the auth has an option. So we have a sign in with the email and password, and we can pass the email and password here. So this can give us this is basically giving us a promise, right? So what we can do is either we can do a dot then, or we can use an async await. Async await will be bit more cleaner in that way. It looks a synchronous kind of code. It's not synchronous, but it will look synchronous. We can add it, but we need to add a try catch to handle that issue if there is any error comes up. Same format we can do for sign up also. Logged in, we want to redirect to the home page, right? So for that, we will inject the router, and that route using that router we will redirect to the home page. So it has a method. So once so we'll add an await so that it is completed, and then we can say that this router dot navigate by URL we can use, or navigate we can use. So we just want to go to the home page once it is completed, and the same format we can use for the sign up. The only difference is here it is sign up with email and password. I think it is create user. uh, I think so. Let's try that out. Yeah, so there is a create user with email and password. We can await for that, and then once it is there, we can redirect to the home page. Let's add the same async await to the Google also, so that we can log in. We can redirect immediately to the as soon as the login is completed. Earlier we added directly inside the component this logic. Now we are adding it in the service itself. Okay, now we can call this method. So we will, so if both has a value, then we'll say basically the auth service. We don't need the auth anymore. I think we are not using that auth, right? So instead we can just rename this to itself to auth. So auth dot, so we can say sign in with email password, and we'll pass the same thing. So we'll say email dot value and password dot value. And this will call automatically once it is successful. It will anyway redirect. I think the name have given there is an S missing. Let's make it as password itself. So it is. So now we need to update the same in the template also. So it is more meaningful. Otherwise, it will be like password with one S. Right? Okay. Same thing we'll do for the login. We'll call the auth service and we'll pass the email and password. In here, we just since we renamed to the auth service, we'll rename it. Okay, Google login. Okay, so it is there any template? Okay, logo is called link here, and it is saying it's not able to find out. We don't need that anymore. The other template we don't need. Behavior subject. Okay, so I think that's a spelling mistake. Looks like a spelling mistake. It should be behavior without a U. I think that is fine. Now what is we have? Subscribe. Okay, that again looks like a spelling mistake. Great. Now that is compilation success. Let's look at the pages. Okay, so now email password, it shows up, both are showing up and the buttons are showing up. The only issue is both are in the same line. We'll try to improve the styling of this login a little bit. So we don't want this to be in both on the same line, right? So right now we have added it in the man card content. So let's try to do something. Let's utilize the features of Flexbox. We'll make it as a display flex, and so it should be a one after another in the same line. So we'll make it as a column. So that's good. So it is coming after one after another. We just need some gap in between. So we'll add a gap. Now if we try the Google login, let's see. Okay, so that doesn't work because we haven't added the click handler. So let's call the method login with Google on the click. Okay, let's try now. Okay, so it is still opening the login pop-up, and we are able to redirect also. So that means we are able to successfully login. But for the email and password, for this to work, we need one more step. We need to enable it in the Firebase. We haven't enabled it yet. So in the sign-in method, we'll add a new provider for the email and password, and we'll just enable it. Now let's try to create a user, and then we'll try to log in with that. I'll just create some trial user. Yeah, it should be a type password, otherwise basically whatever I'm writing is visible. It should not be the case, right? Okay, so we'll sign up and we are able to load. Now let's try the same thing. So if you go to the users, you can see that the new user is already there. Now let's try to log in also. I'm using the same username and password, and I'm trying to log in, and I'm able to successfully log in. Now let's try to improve our to-do list. So now we are able to get the current user. Now what we need is we need to display the to-do of that particular user, not all the to-do. Currently what we are doing, we are just getting all the to-dos. Whatever we are, whenever that to-dos has a change, we are just updating to the items dollar and we are displaying. Rather what we want is we want to get the current user details and user ID, and then we want to pass. In our auth service, we already created a behavior subject user dollar, which is tracking the auth state changed. So we'll utilize that to get the current user, and using that we will filter only for the to-dos only for the current user. We'll first inject the auth service. Now in the user dollar, we can, if we subscribe to that, we'll be getting the current user details. So we have already created the model earlier. So we'll just follow the same approach. Its type is of user or null. So we'll just import the user from the models.
And if the user is there, that is when we will want to get the items. So we'll get the Firestore item. Now the thing is, we'll add a filter condition. Firestore gives the option to add a where conditions. We can have a multiple also, where we can specify for this particular document. So in our case, for example, we want to check for the user ID, right? So whether the particular document dot user ID should be equal to the current user's ID. So we'll just check where the user ID is equal to multiple conditions we can add, and we can say the user.uid. So if that is matching, then only we will associate them. But now it is giving an error, compilation error, because initially the value is empty. I added in a condition, right? Okay, now that is working. Now it's not showing any data because it is not in the current user. Now I added one data, only the data which after I logged in, that is what it is showing. So the what is already there, the existing data, it is not showing up. So that means that functionality is working now. Okay, so even though there are 4, it is showing only 2. Now what is the next thing we need to do? We need to basically show how many items are left. We need to show, and we have some footer action where filtering option is also there. So what we'll do next is how many items are left we will show. So first what we'll do is we'll just create a property. Let's create something like total active items or something, active to-dos. So this will be a number. So we'll just keep it as initially as 0 so that we can later, we'll just get the total count and then we'll add that. Now here also we'll utilize the mat card content, and so that we can put the other items in the bottom. So in the mat card footer is where we'll be showing all these total items and the filtering items options and all. Now how do we get this total active items? So the items dollar is already an observable, right? So whenever the value is changing, it will get the updated value. So we just have to subscribe to it and get the total count. But the thing is, the items dollar contains all the to-dos, the completed ones and the non-completed ones. So since it is an observable, we can add a pipe on it, and we can add multiple operators to it. So we'll first add a filter operator to filter out only the items. I think, yeah, let's try it out. So we'll add a filter, we'll say, so we'll be getting the to-dos basically. Or I think we don't even need a filter. We can utilize just the map, because it is just a list of items we'll be getting. So we can just utilize a map itself, and we can use a normal array filter. So we'll be getting in to-dos array, and from that we are just filtering out and finding only the item which is for this is completed, and we want to get the total length of it. We are not interested in the items anymore, we just want to get the total count. So whatever items which are not completed is what we want to get, and we will want to get the total number and length of that. Okay, now this one, if you subscribe, that is the one which we will get the total active to-dos, because we'll be just getting the number from the previous map operator. So that will be assigning to the total active to-dos. Now if you see, there are 2 items which are left. So that is correct actually, because there are 2 items which are not completed. So it is. Now we'll focus on the next item. So we'll add the filtering option. So we have 3 filtering options, right? one is all or active or completed. We'll just use the button for that. So we can use the one we need all, another one we need is active. We'll create an active one and we will create another one for completed. So basically it shows the current state. What is the current state? That's what we are showing up, right? So at a time, at this stage, what I want to display, is it all the to do items or is it only the active items? So it's basically a view state is what we are talking about. I'll just wrap it inside a div so that it can be styled separately because it has to be on the center. Now what we want is we want some spacing in between all these three. So I'll use a flex box so that, and we can add some spacing. So for the adding a spacing in between, I can use the justify content. And we can use the space between. So now we can see that there is some space between first one and the second option and third option. There is still a bit more gap, I think, because of the content. But for now, we can skip that one. Okay, now when we click on this one, we need to change the what we are displaying on the page. Now we will keep this filter state as a view state, right? So we'll just keep like whatever is the active state. So we need to filter the current to-dos with that, right? So we'll create an enum. So to denote to represent each state. So one is basically the all, second one is the completed one, and the third one is the active ones. Let's create a property to store the current active view state, which is of type filter state, right? So we'll create a so we'll also pass this filter state as a public property so that it can be utilized in the template also. Let's create a method which will basically set the active state. So I'll create a property here which basically will be so initially we'll set it as all, and so that we can, in this method, what we'll do is we'll just override that value. So we will be expecting a filter state and we'll just set it as this dot active filter is equal to filter state, and this can be passed from when clicking on each button. So when we click on this set filter state, and here we'll pass the same. So we are able to get this filter state because we add as a public property. The state dot all, I'll just copy paste all. Second one is all active and complete. I think here I think I made a mistake there. It's actually the first three buttons should have been inside and then the clear complete should have been outside, right? I'll just make that change. So active should be here and then completed should be that button. We'll create a method for the clearing also, and we'll call that. Oh, I didn't save that method. Okay, let me just save that, and then now its compilation is successful. Now what is happening is whenever this filter is changing, we need to change the item installer, because item installer is the one which is displaying the current data. But item installer is listening only for the value changes. So value changes means it will just get only the to-dos for the current user. It will have all the to-dos, right? So now we have two sources actually. One is from whenever the Firestore gets changed, and second source is whenever the filter gets changed. So we need to combine these two sources. Whenever any of these source changes, we want to get the update the view. So we want to combine basically two observables maybe. So first of all thing is I'll make it as an observable so that we can combine these two observables also. So what we'll do is we'll make the active filter as an observable. So we'll use the behavior subject. We'll keep the filter states and initially we'll set it as so same thing, but we are just converting into an observable so that we can combine both the value changes from the Firestore and the filter state. Now instead of I cannot set it directly, instead I have to pass it as a next. Right. So whenever the set filter state, we'll just pass a new value to that observable. Now we need to combine these two observables so that I can get a new value, and that is the one which should be displayed on the page. So to combine something, we can use the combine latest one option. So if you look at the documentation of combine latest, let's look at that. So it is basically for combining two observables, and it will get the two values and it will get it as an array. So if I combine observable comma next observable, and you will getting an array of item. So in the engineering, what we'll do is we'll just combine the two items, which is one is items dollar, second one is the active filter. We'll combine these two, and then we will add a pipe to it because it is an observable, right? So we can just add a pipe to it. And here we will be getting the response in an array. So when we add a map to it, what we'll be getting is an array, and we can destructure, like first item will be the value from the items dollar, which is basically the to-dos. Second value will be the filter state, the current filter state. Okay, since it is an array I've used, I think I need to put that outside of that array and then give the type. So first one is a to-dos array, and second one is a filter state. It's actually a to-do array, right? So to-do is a type we have created. To-dos, and we'll get the filter. Now what we will do is we'll filter out with the current filter. So if the to-dos is all basically, then we can just return everything. In this one, we'll just filter, we'll add a filter saying to do, and if it is basically just a null, then we can just simply return all the to-dos. We don't even need to do a filter. So we'll just simply return all the to-dos. Otherwise, we'll just say to-do dot. So basically, we will just filter out saying that whether the current filter. So if the current filter is completed, then we will set it as true. So we'll just whether it is completed or not, we'll check. I think we can set it as, maybe we can assign a new variable or something. Yeah, if it is completed, then okay. If it is completed, we can set it as true. Otherwise, we can set. Let's try it out. I think I need to try it out. So we'll just create a filter. Basically, it's nothing but we're just adding a filter condition where if it is condition, we'll set it as true or false. simply make it as like that, and we'll say basically the to do current one is equal to filter condition. If it is matching that filter condition, then only will return. We are getting some error, compilation error. Yeah. Now the thing is, we'll create a filtered to do. I mean, basically, we'll create a new property to store that value, because now this is the one we need to display on the page. Because it's not just the to-dos, we want to display the combined version of filtered to-dos actually. Now we're still getting some error. It is saying unknown is not assignable to to-do filter state. So we are getting this error because initially we initialize the value with an undefined item installer. We are setting it as undefined. So if it is undefined, then the value there will be unknown, right? So that's why it is throwing that error. Let's first do a little bit of a cleanup. We'll move to a separate, we'll create a separate function, get Todos, and we'll move all this to the separate function. And what we'll do is we'll just add a null check. So if the item installer is not even available, then we'll just return. So we don't do anything further. So that way that error should not be there. And then also we will call this get Todos from once the item installer is completed. So we know that item installer will have a value, but just to make sure that the TypeScript is not complaining, we are just adding this extra check. Now just check the, let's check the compiler and see whether it is success or not. Okay, so it is compiled successfully. Now let's try to see whether this functionality is working. So if it is all active, everything is showing completed. Okay, I think we made a one mistake, that there is okay, so we are getting the filter, we are displaying the data. Let's try. So whether it's coming to the filter to do's. Okay, it's not even coming to the filter to do's. Why that is happening? Okay, so this filter to do we are not using in the template. So since we are not using in the template, so it's basically no one is subscribing to that. Okay, now we are getting two items. Completed means we don't have anything, nothing is completed. If I click on active, so two items are totally left is there, and if I click on active, again nothing is not showing. So that means we have some issue in our filter condition. Okay, so it is coming inside here now, so that means the data is coming correctly. Okay, so I think I made the mistake of here, the filter condition. Basically I need to add an equality check, but basically that was a simple mistake. I need to check if the current filter is completed, then I need to set it as true. Okay, now let's see whether it is okay. Setting as active, completed, nothing is showing, active is showing, all is also showing. So that means that filter functionality is working fine. Now we will add the set to do as completed functionality. So when we click, so there will be a radio button on the left, and when we click on that, we want to set it as complete. So first thing is we'll add a radio button. So radio button mat radio module, which is already added. So I think we are good. Now we can add the radio button. Okay, so for each item we will add this radio button, and we'll just keep that option. I mean, whatever the text we want to show, basically it will be the Todos title. Now, whenever the change, basically you selected on something, select the radio button or check the radio button, we will set it as completed. And once it is set, then we will maybe make it as disabled. So basically it is always, basically we are setting as completed if the value is changing. Let's create that method. So here what we need is, we want to update an existing to do item, and we want to set the value of is completed as true. We will disable if the item is already completed, so that the value cannot be changed, because once it is completed we cannot change it again. How do we update the document? That's what we want to see now. Okay, so the UI is showing up with the radio button. Let's try. We'll keep the li here, and then we'll add the radio button. Okay, so there is some change we cannot add there, so we'll keep that back into the radio button, and we are getting these options in 2 different lines. Okay, great. Now we'll go to the documentation and see how we can update the data. So how do we update the data? So we can, basically there is a set, delete and update option methods are there. Update is what we want to do. So how do we do that? So we need to get the Angular firestore.doc. So we already have the Firestore. You can say .doc, and where in our case collection name is Todos / then basically we have the current to-do ID. So to-do ID, how do we get that? So we are not getting the ID right now, and also in the type we haven't given an ID. That's why it is complaining, right? So we'll do both. By default, when we query for the Firestore, it doesn't return the ID. So first thing is, we need to get the ID. Also, we need to update our type to include the ID also. So in our so there is an option Firestore provides, where in the value changes we can specify what should be named for that ID field, so that ID field also will be included. So we can just simply name it as ID. But now in our model we didn't add that, so we'll mention it as ID. But then if you add in this way, when we insert an item, when we add an item, we are not passing an ID because it is auto generated. So we'll make it as an optional field. Okay, now we are getting the document. So now we got the to-do ID, it is not complaining anymore. Now the only thing is that we can just do the update. So to-do-doc.update we can do, and we can just set what value we want to set. We want to set it as true, is completed as true. Now let's see whether this is working or not. So we'll go to the application, we'll set is hello. Now it is disabled, you can see, and the change, initially it was 2 items left, now it is 1 item left. And the filtering also we can see in the completed section, we can see 1. Now we look at the deleting part. So we have 2 things. One is clear completed, which will delete all the completed to-dos. And there is a single option also, we'll just delete a single item. So first we'll look at so a single item is basically just if you click on the delete icon, it will just delete the stuff. We'll look at the how do we delete the items, right? So if I look at this one, so there is a document.delete option is there. Directly we have a document delete. So let's try to do that. The first thing what we need to do is we cannot delete from the to do value changes because that contains all the items, right? So that contains, so when we look at the Firestore collection where we add a filter condition, which is basically all the to-dos of the user. What we want is we want only the to-dos which are completed so that we can delete all that, right? So we'll just get the, so we'll add a new query. We'll create a new collection basically with both the filters. So first we'll add the check whether if the user basically is available. We'll create a similar collection like how we did originally. Just that we'll add an extra where condition to make sure that we are getting only the items which are completed. I think I added in the wrong place. I think I need to add it in the clear completed. Still, I think it is complaining because it can be null. So I'll utilize maybe the optional chaining. So we'll just put a question mark so that compilation error is gone. Now this is one where condition which is existing already, right? Now we need another where condition because we want only the completed items. So we are just chaining the where condition. So we are adding, we can have any number of where condition like this. So we are adding, first one is already, we still need that one. Second, we will just check whether if it is completed or not. So we are just adding another condition. Okay, now from this we need to get the item and then we need to delete that. I have seen in when I searched it, I saw that multiple options how we can do that. So we'll just try it out few the options. Let's see which one work out. So it's not a direct observable, so I cannot add in that way. But if I use a get, I'll get an observable. So here I'm not using the value changes. And instead value changes also give me an observable. So here I'm getting get because I want the final items, and then we'll subscribe and we'll try to delete. Let's try that one first and we'll see if it is working or not. So same like how we got the document for setting item as completed, right? So once I'm getting a single item, same thing we'll try it out here. We'll just get a one single document and from there we'll just try the delete method. We'll try it out with that whether it is working or not. Okay, so we are getting some error saying it's not some overload missing we are getting. So we'll try, let's say we'll add the collection of to do. Still we are getting some error. Okay, so basically what it is returning is a query snapshot. It's not really returning the to do items when we do the get actually. So the get really returns a snapshot. So let's try to change that. Let's try value changes, or let's try with value changes and see. Okay, so let's see the here. So I just followed that Stack Overflow. What it is saying basically is value changes dot subscribe, and then we will get the document and then we'll try to delete that. Let's see if it is working. So I'm just selecting that, clear completed, but nothing is happening. So that means that it didn't work. So it is coming to the to-dos. We are getting the to-dos, and then for each to-do we are collecting the document and then we are deleting. I'm assuming it is because since it is asynchronous, it is not doing that, or it's a software, it's not able to identify that. Okay, so what we'll do is let's try another approach. We'll try with a snapshot option. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the get, and so then we will be again getting the snapshot, right? So now here we will subscribe. So we will be what we'll be getting? We'll be getting the snapshot. Let's try with that. We'll map and we'll get the snapshot of that. So let's make it as some query snapshot QS. This is basically a query snapshot of the to-do. We have imported that, and edges of time to do. Okay, so this contains all the documents, so we can just return simply all the documents. Now if I subscribe, what I'm getting is not the to-dos. What I am getting is basically the query snapshot actually. So we'll create the query snapshot document, query document snapshot of the to-do, and then we'll try to see whether we are okay. Now the for each is not available because I think the type I have given, I think it should be wrong. Okay, even that is not the case because still we haven't given it as an array. Let's try, actually I think we are getting an array, so let's change that. It's actually an array of query document snapshot. Now we'll try to do the for each. I mean, we could have given it as to-dos also in name. From there, what we'll get is we'll get each query document snapshot. Okay, we'll give some type also. Now let's try whether this snapshot delete works fine or not. Okay, so if we go to the application, we click on clear completed, it is coming to the method and it deleted the one which is not completed. We wanted the opposite actually, right? I think that's, oh, so we added is completed equal to false. It should have been true. Now let's try that again. Now when we click that is completed, whatever is completed one, it got deleted. So now we added 2. So now let's make it as 1 as completed. And we'll clear it and it is working fine. Okay, great. Now we will also make it as like checked so that it is clear that what is completed, right? Otherwise it doesn't visibly show that it is a completed item. Now it shows that whatever is completed, it will show in the checked option. So which is more clear that if it is completed or not. Okay, now what we need is what is the next step? We need to delete a single item. We should be able to delete a single item. So for that, we will just add a button for now. We'll style it up later. So on click of that, we'll just want to delete that single to do. So we'll just create one method, maybe a delete to do. Here we are expecting a to do item, and so this function will be calling on click of this function button. So we'll pass the current item on the delete, and here since it is set directly, we can just create the doc and then we can say to do doc dot delete. Let's try that out. Okay, so if you click on delete, now it is gone. So that means that functionality is working. We have some custom icons in our application, right? So we have the, once it is checked, we show some check mark, and then theme switcher, we have some icon, delete icon, we have some custom icon. So these are all some custom icons. Even for dark theme, there's a different icon. So I followed an article from DigitalOcean where it is saying how do we add the custom icons. The first thing is basically the um, how do we, so we need to add the, for material icon we have the mat icon module we can add. So that's the first step we need to do. So I'm just going to follow that article to add this icon. So I already added the icon images to the under the assets images folder. So these are the 4 icons which we need to add. So I'll first add the icon module to our app module, which is not there already. So we'll just add that. Okay, now we added the icon module. What is the next step? We need to, so we also need the HTTP module because this icon files are, SVG files are being loaded using the HTTP protocol. So we are importing the HTTP client module also. Now from the top level component, which is app component, we will just utilize mat icon registry to register these icons. So we are just injecting the icon registry. Now the next step is we just have to give the name. So we just have to add to the registry and then give a name for the icon and then give a path. So we'll just see what is the name. So under assets we have icon hyphen check, for example the first one, right? We'll give the same name. SVG we don't need, and then from the path we have asset slash images slash and the file name, and we'll follow the same for all the icons. So second one is icon hyphen cross. Third one is moon. Last one is sun. Okay, now let's try to see whether it is loading up or not. So we have the first one is if it is checked, we will show this icon. If it is not checked, we'll show the normal radio button. So we'll add some if condition, if else condition. So if the item is already checked, then we will, so if it is completed, then we'll show the icon, else we'll show the normal radio button. So I'm just creating a template for the else block. There we can add the icon. So in the else scenario, we'll render this else block. Okay, there is one thing which is missing was the DOM sanitizer. I think that's an extra security check measure. So DOM sanitizer when we are adding, so that if the path is, to make sure that the path is not corrupted. So we are adding the DOM sanitizer and then it is adding that extra path check. So only these URLs we are just allowing to be loaded using the HTTP. Okay, now we need to just add this SVG. So let's try that. So SVG icon, and then we'll give the icon name. So we are given icon hyphen check. So let's try with that icon hyphen check, and then we'll pass. One thing is actually it should have been the opposite, right? So we need to show the radio button on the else block and the icon once it is completed. So I think I missed one closing. Yep. Now we have added the if else condition. Let's see whether this icon is showing up or not. Okay, let me add some item. Let's make it as completed. Okay, once it is completed, it's actually going blank. So that means the icon is there, but it's not showing correctly. So I ended up adding the following styles to the icon. So basically we need a round uh, appearance. So I'm adding a border radius of 90 pixel. So from the style guide, there was for the background, there was a linear gradient was added. So from this to this, right? So for that, I'm adding a background linear gradient from this to the same styles I have just copied. Now the SVG was not placing it correctly because the check icon was to be shown correctly. So I just added a position absolute because I have given position related to the top one, and set to the SVG I have given an absolute with the positioning. So this made the checkbox on the center. Now we look into the theme switch option. So we have an option. We can, if we click on this icon, so it will change to the dark theme, and then we can switch back also. Right. So we'll also add a bit more functionality. If I refresh the page, I want to persist that theme also. So the thing is, we have created two themes by default: the light theme, and if the body is having the dark theme. I mean, if you attach to the top element a dark theme, then we will add the dark theme. So we should, first thing is how we should have an option to change the class. So we should change the class dynamically. So in a simple terms, basically adding a class to a document body is simple as just document.body.add class. But we'll try to do it in an Angular terms. So first thing is we'll just add a theme switch icon. So we'll add that for changing. So we'll have by default we'll add the light theme icon. So we'll add a method also change theme. So this will call when we click on this button. So if we look at the icons, what all icons we created. So in that we need icon moon or icon sun. So by default, if you are showing the light theme, then we will show the icon mode by default. So if I click on icon mode, it should change to the dark theme. We'll give the same class name. Now if you look at it, you can see that the icon is being shown. Okay, so now how do we change this class in an Angular format? So first we'll just try the simple one. You can just simply say document.cardinist. But if we want to do it in an Angular format, there is another option called renderer. You can utilize the renderer for that. Why we use renderer is because its dependency we can inject the renderer, so it is more we can easily handle that in the testing also, unit testing also. We'll also create one theme service. so that we can store all theme related functionalities in a single place. So we'll add the methods for basically setting the theme and getting the theme, all those things in the. So we will also add one functionality. So basically we want to persist that, so that even if I refresh the page, we still want to keep the whatever is a theme which was active last. We can just use session storage if you want to simply store. We will also create an enum for having these two themes. So we have a dark and we have a light theme. So on the theme to storage, what we'll do is we'll just set the whatever is a set the theme, whatever is that, we'll just set that to the session storage. And in get, what we'll do is we'll just try to read from session storage. But if it is not available, we can do is we can just queue the default theme. So we'll just by default utilize the theme lights. Now we'll just inject the theme service. Now on change theme, we'll just call the same sets. And so initially what we'll do is we'll just get the current theme. So whatever is that current theme, we'll just assign that. So let's create a variable for the current theme. And by default, we'll set again as a light theme. So get current theme, the problem is session storage.get item is returning a string. So that's why it is giving condition. So what we'll do is we'll just add a ternary operator so that it will return either so the theme dark or theme dot light. So we're just following the type conventions. I think there's a now it is okay. I think we have ordered 2 question marks, so I think here we need to okay, now it is correct. Now on change theme, what we'll do is we will set the whatever is the current theme we will first get, and which is basically stored, and we'll just set the whatever is the active theme. So we need to also change the icon as well, right? So we'll do 2 things actually. So if it is theme is light, we need to set the theme as dark. Otherwise, we need to set the opposite. So we'll set the theme as light. We'll also set the same thing for the current theme property. Now here we are using the renderer to say that we can add a class, we can say the target element, and we can say what class we need to add. So in the theme CSS we added a class name dark theme, right? So this is the one which we want to add when we want to move to the dark theme. The same thing we want to remove the class when we want to remove the dark theme, we want to move to the light theme. So why I am not putting this in the service is a renderer works only in a component. So we cannot inject that in a service. So that's why I have to do it in the component. Now the icon also we need to make it dynamic. We cannot always make it as icon mode. So what we'll do is let's create another variable or property to store the icon or the icon name. Just directly add a check here also and then add that, but to simplify it, let's add it as a property. So we'll create a theme icon, and by default again we will keep it as whatever we by default gave is icon mode. So icon mode by default we will give it a, and when we want to change to the dark theme, we will change it to the icon sun, right? So icon sun, yeah. So we'll change it to the icon sun. And we'll read this value in the template. Now let's see whether it is compiling successfully. Now if you see, if I click on it, you can see that the theme is changing and the icon also is changing. We're also setting the theme in the storage, right? Let's look into that. So if you look at the session storage, we can see that the theme value dark is showing. But if I refresh the page, is it persisting? Let's try that out. Now I'm refreshing, it is going back to the light theme. So that means it still didn't take that one. It's not because it is not persisting, but on initializing, we are not really setting the class name if it is dark, right? So what we'll do is we'll just try to do whatever we are doing in the change theme. So in the initial, we'll move to a method because we want to repeat this. Now within this one, what we want to do is we want to, if the theme, basically whatever the theme we got is a dark one, then we want to so we want to do a bit opposite of the change theme. It's not exactly same, because if it is light, then we want to set the current theme as icon. So that is the default one actually, right? So I think we don't even need that. Otherwise, we will set it as current. So basically, if the theme is this one, light, we will set it as icon mode, and otherwise we will set it as the icon sun. Now if I refresh the page, the theme is still persisting, and we are able to switch the theme also. Now let's switch the app header. So there are some layouts issues. One is login. We don't want to show if the user is already logged in. Instead, we want to show the logout, and the title also is not aligned correctly. So it should be like title and the icon should be on side by side, and the color should be different, right? So these are the some issues which we'll try to fix. So we want to know whether the user is logged in or not. So what we will do is we'll import the auth service. So that we can know whether the user is there or not. We'll create a property to store the current user. So it is of type user or null, and we'll initialize with a null value. So we'll just subscribe to the user dollar, which is behavior subject, and then we'll subscribe and we'll get the user, same as how we did the other components. And we will be getting we'll assign that to the user property. Now, if this user has a value, that is when we want to show the logout. So if the user is not there, then we want to show the login. So if user is not there, then we will show the login. And we will show a logout button if the user is already there. So let's take a button example. We'll simply take a flag button. And this will show only if the user is having a value. Now we'll create a logout method which will be called on click of the logout button. So we'll call our auth service, where we already added the sign out. And the remaining part we'll put it in a separate div so that we can style accordingly. So in this one, we want to show side by side, right? So we can utilize again the flexbox. So by default, the flex direction is fine, so we don't need to change that. The justify content we will say space between, so that both will be at the opposite ends. So the login button we want to show on the right, so I'm just utilizing the justify content right to that. And now we can see that those Todo and icon is showing it. But the only thing is that icon is not showing fully. But other than that, the alignment is fine. There is some spacing in between we need to improve. So there is not enough spacing. So it is after and before the header we need some spacing. So what we'll do is we'll just let's add some margin. On the top level we need, top of the page we need, so we'll just add some spacing, and also on the bottom side of that. Now to the H2 specifically, we'll again add some extra. So it needs some spacing between the letters. So that extra spacing also we'll try to add that there. So we'll use the letter spacing for that, and we'll put some fixed font size. So this font weight was given in the style guide. We'll just follow that one. Okay, now there is some letter spacing, and this also, it's almost similar to that. Okay, now the another issue is the icon is not fully visible. If you see at the bottom, there is a bit of a gap. So right, so we'll just try to add the height a little bit so that the complete icon is visible. Now we can see that the icon is visible completely. Okay, and the color, it's uh, it's black right now, but we will want to change to the white, which is as per the design. We can move this to a variables file in the theme. Under the SCSS, we can create a variables file, and we can do that also. Now it's both login and logout are showing, and on the click of logout, we need to also redirect back to the login page. So I think I added navigate by URL to slash. It should be actually slash login, right? So that is one issue. So if I log out, and now another thing is we are displaying both the links if the user is logged in. So we'll just keep ngif condition so that if it is user is having a value, then only we will display the logout button. Now we'll try the login. Once I logged in, you can see only logout is being shown, and I click on logout and it's going back to the login page. Our header is always static. We just hard coded it as to do. What we want is, if it is a login page, we want to show it as login. If it is a home page, then we can show it as to do. So how do we know when the page is changing? Right. So there are multiple ways we can do that, because basically it all depends on the router. So in this case, let's focus on the in the router outlet, route change event. So basically, whenever the route is activated, so there is an activate option we can pass to the router outlet. Whenever that route is changing, at that time we can change that header. So we can know what is the current route which got activated, and then we can change the title accordingly. Now the thing is, here this whatever is this title, page title we want to give, that is available in the, we are displaying that in the header component. So we want to pass this to the header component. So we'll get the router to get the current page URL. So we can just check whenever the router is changing, we can check whatever is the current URL. If the current URL, if it is slash, or basically the home page, then we will set it as, or if it is login, right? So if it is, we'll set it as the header as login. Otherwise, by default, we'll set it as to do. Now this page title, we want to pass it to the header. So that means the header component needs to accept it as an input property. So we'll add an input property. We'll initially set it as MD and MD string, which is fine. We'll add this input property, and input is now imported from Angular core. Now this page title property, will pass it from the app component. We'll use the same page title in the template also. Now, in our component, we are setting the page title. Now this page title will, so basically the property and to which property, input property, both are same name. So we'll just use that. So now we are in login page, it is showing us login. Now in the to do page, it is showing us to do. Now it's not a capital, so we'll just use the CSS itself to change the text transformation as always uppercase. Our layout is a bit different between mobile and desktop. So if you see the desktop, it basically all the filters and all the footer items are on the same line, right? And if you see the mobile, only the filter items are on the bottom and only the 5 items left and clear completed is on another. So it's basically two separate sections altogether. So fixing this, displaying this and all using CSS may be more tricky, like we have to add more styles. Rather we can utilize the material CDK to understand whether it's a mobile screen or not. It is providing a lot of APIs for that. So let's try with this one. So let's see the observer module. Observer module, if you add, I think this observer, or we'll try it out. Oh, sorry, observer module doesn't give that. That is just gives us an directive. What we want is a layout. So in layout module, we have a breakpoint observer. So there we can check, we can utilize this and it will provide us a breakpoint observer, and we can check whether it is a small screen or a big screen. So let's try to add that module. Now let me remove the observer. We don't need the observer module, we just need the layout module only. Now in layout module, what we can utilize is, if you go to the TS, there is something called breakpoint observer. So we need to inject this breakpoint observer and then check whether it is matching with this, whether it's a small screen, to understand whatever is the breakpoint specification we are giving. So we need to do this in the home component because we'll want to show two different layouts. So we'll import the breakpoint observer. I'm just using the same name, it can be any name. We'll follow the same approach. We'll just create a boolean property where if it is a small screen or not. And on the engine unit, we'll just check whether if it is small screen, we'll just check whether is it matching or not. So is matched, and then what we want to match is, as per our style guide, we want to check whether it is within 375 pixel. So in our styles we have 375 pixels, so we'll just utilize that. So anything above 375, so it's not a small screen for us. Now we'll create two different template. So one for the mobile and one for the normal one. Because if you see, if it is for mobile, it is a separate card itself. So it's a separate box itself, the other filters are being shown. So we'll create a separate card only if it is a small screen, and we'll just keep the same filter containers there. And other two items are shown on the left and right. Actually, clear completed should have been outside the filter container, so I'll just keep it outside. That is how it should have been. And in case of mobile, we don't want this actually to be shown, so we'll add an ng if it is not a mobile screen, then only we want to show. Just the opposite condition we'll put. Now if you see here, by default it looks fine, there is no change. We'll make it as a mobile screen, and okay, if you refresh the page, now we can see that it is showing it in two different lines. So all active completed is showing in a separate box, so that means the breakpoint functionality is working. We'll fix the layout for the list items. So there are multiple issues. So we can see one is each list item has more space and there is a border, and so on mouse over is where we will be showing the delete icon. So all these things we'll try to fix. So basically it's like a list item. We'll try to utilize a list item from the material for the same. So it's so we'll import the list module. So each to do is a list item. So same like how, because it's a list of items we are displaying, so we'll just try to do the same format. So in here we are looping through ULLI. Instead we'll change it to a list, and then is to do will make it as a list item. So we'll add the ng4 to the list item. And we'll just copy the same thing, whatever we inside the li, we'll just copy the same thing inside the list item, so that we can remove the ULLI. Okay, now that is added, let's see how it is looking. Okay, so there is a bit more space is there. On making it completed, the checkbox is coming, but that delete icon should be on the right hand side, and it should be displayed only on mouse over. We'll fix that. We'll align the footer items, which is basically the one item left is still not showing on the center. So we'll just try to see if we can make it vertically center. Okay, so now everything is on the same line, and also there is some extra spacing on the left side. We'll try to add a little bit of spacing between the completed items also. So let's try to add maybe a span, so that we can add some extra spacing for that. We also want to add a strike through for whatever is completed for the text, so we'll add that style also. So for the completed, we'll say text decoration as line through, so that when it is completed, it will show a strike through is being shown. Also, the spacing between these items seems a bit high. Let's see how that is coming up. So for that particular button, it seems to be like there is a padding added which is 16 pixel. Let's try to change it to maybe some 2 pixel and see how it is. Okay, so 2 pixel looks okay. So we'll add the same. So but we want only for the buttons inside the for the filter items, right? So let's take that class which is a filter container. Yeah, so now I think the spacing looks okay. So want a little bit of spacing between the text and the checkbox. We can try this out. Let's try it out directly here. If we add some padding left, so we want it to align to the non-checked item. So we'll just play around with the value. I think 7 pixel looks okay. So we'll try to add that one. So we'll say padding left 7 pixel. Okay, 6 pixel we can try. Yeah. Now we don't need this delete button to be shown always. We just want to show it on the hover, mouse hover. Let's add some class for the delete icon, delete button. So when the mat list item, when we mouse over it, that is when we want to display it. So by default, we want it to be display none. So we'll use the hover pseudo class, and here on that time we'll just display it as. Maybe we can try to display as inline and see. Yeah. Now on mouse over it shows. Now we also want to move this to on the right side. So we can try to, we'll see if we can add a display flex and then try to move this to the right hand side, whether that works or not. That remember. Because it doesn't take the full space, whatever the content it is taking that much only, so it's not a full width, so it is not able to take that. And I think it got overwritten by display block. We can try another option. We can try relative and make this button as an absolute and align on the right side. Okay, now it is aligned on the right side. What else we need here? We need a border after each item, so maybe we can add that. So we'll add some border bottom solid, and what color we can put. So if you look at the style guide, which the front-end vendor provided, there is some colors are there. Maybe we can try that. It looks very white, so maybe that doesn't work. It's a bit of a dark color, so we can try that. Yeah, I think that seems very dark. It is not that much dark here. We'll just use a simple gray color like 88, which is a basic gray. And that seems a bit high. Can try to lighten the color a little bit and see what we can do. Okay, so TF seems to be a light one, so we'll just use that one. Now the border is not really touching the side. Border is not touching the side because I think there is some padding given. We can try to remove that padding. So for the math card, we'll just try to add padding 0. Okay, now the border is touching. We'll put the margin completed, clear completed. It is touching on the right side. We'll just add some space so that there is some right side space here. It looks more cleaner. Now let's compare. Okay, there is another one is if the whatever is an active filter, we want to give some color so that it is clear that which filter state we are on right now. So what we'll do is we'll add a class dynamically based on the current filter state. So we'll add a class which will return basically which will return whether the current filter is active or not. So this will utilize to add a dynamic class. So we will get the current filter, active filter will just compare it and it will return true or false. So we are getting error active filter since the okay, so active filter is a behavior subject, so we cannot get directly the value. Instead we need to say get value. So from the behavior subject we can get like that. If it is a normal subject we wouldn't be able to get like that. So which will return the latest value of the behavior subject. Now we can add an ng class with a condition. So we can call, so we'll add an active class if its value is true. So we'll call isFilterActive and we'll pass the current filter state. And we'll do the same for all. So the class active filter will be applied if the current filter is active. So we have the mobile view and the desktop view. That's why we have this duplicated ones. Now if we look at this one, so for all, there is an active filter class is added. Now we just have to add some styles to the active filter. So we will add some different color. So if you look at this one, this looks like a blue color. Can try with that. So all this we can actually move to the variables file. Okay, so this looks a bit dim. That looks very dark. I think we need something in between. Let's try to get some color using the color picker. So we'll use a light shade of the blue. So, and we'll utilize that color. Now, if we change the active filter state, we can see that the color is changed for whatever is the filter which is active right now. Let's see how the application looks in a mobile view. So, if I refresh the page, I think overall it's okay, but there is no gap between the last filter. So it should be a separate box, but it doesn't look like that. So we'll try to add that. So that is only for mobile. So we'll add an extra class for the filter container for the mobile. So we'll add some margin so that there will be some gap. And there is the clear completed is not really aligned on the right. That is because we added a margin right for the clear completed for the footer, but that is only required on the desktop. We don't need that for the mobile. So that's why it is adding that extra space on the right side. So what we can add is we can utilize a media query to remove that extra spacing. Okay, now the clear completed is aligned on the right side also. Now we will add some unit test cases. So already Angular has the unit test setup is there. So Angular, if you look at the package.json, so there is already a test command added which will run the test case. The only thing is that it will be failing now because we added a lot of components and we didn't update the test case with that. Now by default, it opens a Chrome browser and it is opening by the Karma. Karma is the test runner. So it opens the Chrome browser and it will execute all the test cases on that and it will give the result. So you can see here it is showing that it is compiling and then starting a browser Chrome. and it opened a new browser instance, and it is showing that all the test cases which are failing. So basically all test cases will fail because we updated a lot and we didn't really modify anything, right? So we'll try to fix the test cases. We'll not add any more scenarios, but at least we'll try to fix so that all the test cases at least currently will be passing. But what we need is, first thing is, we don't need a new browser instance to be open every time, which will not work correctly in the continuous integration scenarios. So we'll create a headless option. If you go to the Angular documentation they're providing, so you need to go to the karma conf and we can add the, so I'm just following the Angular documentation as it is. You can create a custom launcher and we can add a browser. So we are creating a new browser which is nothing but a Chrome with a headless option. So Chrome without a interface, that's what we are adding. Now we'll add a new command also for this one so that this can be utilized in our deployment setup or the continuous integration setup. So I'll just copy the command, so which basically, like, there is no watch, means it will not continuously test, and it is using the headless Chrome option. Now when we run this command, it will execute the same test case, but it is executing without opening a new browser instance. It is still running that in the Chrome. It's run by Karma, but it will run within the terminal. We'll get the result also within the terminal. So you can see that again here it's showing starting browser, Chrome headless it is opening, but it didn't open a separate Chrome browser instance, and it shows the error there itself. So all the 9 out of 9 are failing. Now we'll try to fix it one by one. First one is, you can see login component, it is failing. So we'll try to open login component. So most of these errors, or all the errors right now, will be nothing but the injection error, dependency injection, because we have some dependencies for each component, but the Angular is not able to, that test module is not able to find that dependency, or it is not able to inject it correctly. So what we will do is, when we are testing login component, other dependencies are, we don't need to test that, so we'll mock it actually, or we will create a dummy, we'll replace it with a dummy one. So in this case, we are using auth service. Auth service, this many methods we are utilizing. So what we'll do is, we'll create an object. That is how the auth service instance finally will be coming to the login component. So we will create a dummy object which contains all the methods of an auth instance which this component is using. So we'll name it as some mock auth service. So one first command method we are using, sign in with email and password, which is returning a promise, right? So we'll create, it's a function which returns a promise. Same way we look at the other methods we are using. We are using sign up with email and password. Again the same thing, a function which returns. So we are just creating an empty promise, so that directly we are resolving, immediately we are resolving. That's why we are using the promise to resolve, because we are not really interested in the result for now. We are just trying to make the existing test cases pass. Same with Google also, the same scenario. And that's it. Now this one we will use under the providers. So what we are doing is, we are replacing the original with this dummy one. There are two ways we can do. Either we can use it as a use value or a use class. Use class, if you means, it will give more customization. You can create a custom mock class actually. Here in this case what we are doing is, we are creating an object, so we are replacing it with a value. So basically the instance of the auth service is replaced with our mock data. Now when we run this again, okay, now when we run this, test failure is to the next component, which moved to the home component. So now let's look at home component. Again, home component also the same scenario. Let's look at the dependency. So we have a dependency on Firestore, dependency on auth service, and the breakpoint observer. So we have to mock 3 items. So Angular Firestore, what we are using is we have a collection method which returns an object with the value changes property, which finally returns an observable. So let's try to create a mock for that first. I'll just start the import here. And we will create a mock Firestore. So we need basically a collection method which will return value changes. So it will be a method which returns an object which has again a method. Value changes is again a method which returns an observable. So just to create any dummy of an S with a static value, observer with any value, we can utilize the auth of RxJS, auth method of RxJS, which can be utilized to create an observer. So we'll just create, here it is expecting an array, so we'll just return auth of an array. What else Firestore collection it is expecting? There is another way we are using is get. We are using the dot get. So get supposed to return again an observer. So we'll return get method is a method. Get is a method which returns an observer. So we'll add this get property, which is a function which returns. Again, we'll use the auth. And again, we have Firestore has a doc method. So that will be another one. So we'll create a doc, which is a method which returns an object with an update property, update method. An update is it's a void method, so it doesn't have to return anything. And it has a delete also the same format, which doesn't return anything. We can just use that for also. Now we can add the under the providers. So instead of Angular Firestore, we are asking the test module to use this mock one. Again, it's a use value. If you wanted more customization, we could use also the use class as well. Then we have to provide a class. Second one is we do the auth service. We'll create that const. In here from auth service, what we are doing is we are looking at the user dollar. User dollar is an observable which emits the user object. Again, so we can use the auth. So we can just create a dummy user, a user with a simple UID. And I think that's the only thing we are using. So we can add this under the providers. The next one is the breakpoint observer. So breakpoint observer, we are just using one method just to see whether it's a small screen or not. So it is using the method is isMatch. So we'll just simply return a function which returns false. We're not really interested in the value for now. So we'll just simply return it as false. Okay, now let's try to run this and see whether it is passing or not. Okay, now this error seems to be gone. Now it went to the next component, which is the header component. In header component again, same scenario. We have renderer, theme service, and auth service. Auth service again from auth we are using the same user dollar. So we can just copy from the other spec files. Theme service we haven't used anywhere, so we'll just create a mock of that. So we'll just import the theme service and we'll create a mock theme service. So from theme service we are using get current theme is one method, which is a function which returns a theme enum. So we'll give light or dark, doesn't matter. And second one is a set theme storage, which is a function which is it's a void function. So we don't need to return anything. Okay, and renderer is a from the Angular core, so I don't think we need to mock that. At least now, unless we have some result, we need to test based on some result from the renderer. But in our case, we don't need to mock anything on that. So we'll just use with these two. So we'll same thing. So we'll add the providers and we'll add provide and use value. Let's try to run it again. Okay, now the error is moved to the auth service. That means it is passing. Let's move to the next one. So service is comparatively simpler ones. So in auth service again we have fire auth and router. So one option is we could actually add the modules also so that the error won't come. But then Angular Fire needs to have some Firebase initialization and all, which we don't want to give in the test case. So we can just mock the same way how we did earlier. We'll just mock the fire auth. So let's look at the methods we are using for. One is on auth state changed. It's a function and we are expecting so that function will be executed. So we'll just simply add some user with some UID. And second one is sign in with passwords, which is again sign in with pop-up and which is a promise. So function which returns a promise. So all the other methods are simply like that. A function simply which returns a promise, and we are just doing with a promise to resolve. Sign in with email and password. create user with email and password. And finally, we have the sign out also. Okay, the next one is we have the router module. So we'll just add this under the providers as well. For router we can also mock it, but we don't need to, because instead we can just simply add the router. So there is a router testing also is module is also there, or we can just simply add the Angular routing module. And we'll just create some, we'll not create in routes, we'll just make it as an empty array. So there is no routes, but we'll just initializing a router module so that the test module is able to inject the router. Now let's run it again. Now that error is gone, now it is moved to the add to do component. In add to do component, again we have the same injection error. So we have the Firestore and the auth service. So both we used in other components, other spec cases. So we can just copy from that. We don't need all these methods, but we just we can even utilize that. And we can even copy the providers. I think that should be enough. Okay, it is throwing error on off because we didn't import that. So off is a method from RxJS and we forgot to copy that. Let's run it again. Now the error is showing on app component. In app component, we have auth service again, router, other two are mat icon registry also is there, and so we can get these from the other spec files. So auth service, but in this case auth service we are using the initialize method. So we'll create one new one. We didn't use the same method in other places. Only in here we are using the initialize method. So initialize is a simple method. It's a void one, so we don't need to return anything. So we'll add the providers with use value. And the second one is we can add the mat icon registry. So mat icon registry, we don't need to mock it actually. Instead, we can actually add the mat icon module. So for the DOM sanitizer also, we don't need to really mock it because it is coming from the Angular directly. So we don't need to even add that. Angular is able to understand that. For the router, Again, we can add the same format how we did for auth service. But if you see here, there is a router testing module is already there, so we don't need to add this again. So these two options is there. We can use router testing module, so or we can directly use a router module. So router testing module is there, so we don't need to add again. And mat icon module we added, and I think that should be enough. Okay, now let's see the error. What is there? Okay, it is giving, it is expecting that Angular Firebase. So the title, that's the default title. It is expecting that to be available in the template, but the templates we already changed, so it's a valid error. It is supposed to give that error. So we are Angular Firebase to do is the default title which is already there. So that's why that test is passing. But in below, it is expecting that in the template also this will have, but in the template we don't have that. So that's why it is expecting that content span to have a text content, but we don't even have this anymore. So we can remove this test case. It doesn't make sense to add it here. So it will remove it and try again. And it's all test cases are passing. Perfect. Now we will add some code quality check by adding ESLint to the system. So ESLint follow make sure that our code is following some kind of a standards and some basic quality check is being added. So Angular by default doesn't add that, but if you do an ESLint, it will enable the ESLint in our Angular application. So it will, because it needs to add some extra packages, it will ask us should we add that or not. So we want to add that, so we'll press yes. Now the ESLint packages. So basically it will run an ng-add of ESLint schematics will be added, which will add some package and also it will add the ESLint RC file, which contains the basic rules of the ESLint. And now it's installing the packages. Now let's try to run. So now you can see that the lint command is added to the packages, and so we can run that one actually. So it's doing the ng-lint. If you look at the ESLint RC, which contains the rules, what all rules are there. So currently it is having the Angular's recommended ESLint rules are there, and Angular recommended template ESLint rules are there. So these are the two rules which are there. We can add our own custom rules, or we can even take the other recommended rules also. So that's how we make sure that everyone in the project who is working on this project is following the standard, same standard, which is important for a project with a lot of people working. Okay, so here we got there are two errors are there, which is basically the lifecycle methods should not be empty. So it is showing error on line number 77, ng on init, it is empty. So we can remove that. Here also line number 19, we have the ng on init. Again the same issue. We are not adding any method there, anything there, so we can. But now since we don't have an ng on init, we should not use the interface, because otherwise it is a TypeScript error itself. Okay, now there is no lint error, it's only a warning which says on init should be implemented for method ng on init. So we are adding the ng on init, but we didn't really implement. So this is a warning. So even if we don't fix this, it will still be okay. But it's good to make sure that there is no lint issue at all, even warning. Since on init we added then ng on init, so that means that means if you add on init, then there should be an ng on init. So again here also we need to remove that because we don't have an ng on init anymore. It was empty, so we removed it, and it is passing again. TypeScript is not complaining. Now we'll do also some ESLint for the TypeScript. So here TypeScript ESLint, there is a site is there, so we can see which is the official site. It gives some plugins to be installed or npm packages to be installed. So we'll just try to install that. So why we add this one is because we can get the recommendations for the ESLint recommendation for TypeScript also. Angular has given the recommendations for Angular specific. Here we are adding the extra. So we have to add this extra recommendation plugins. So we'll add under the ESLint RC. So we have the ESLint recommended. So we'll just add under the extents. Same way we have the TypeScript ESLint recommended. And this TypeScript needs an extra parser. So we'll have to add that also. Parser and plugin. We'll try to add that as well. Now that's it. So now the installation is going on. Once installation is done, we can actually run the lint and see whether it is picking up any new issues or not. Okay, now the installation is completed. Let's run the lint again. Now there are 8 errors are there and 5 warnings. Empty constructor, so it's a simple fix. We can simply remove that. So there is even option where we can simply fix with ESLint fix option is there. If you add that, so something can be automatically fixed also. We can add directly in the as a packages and command itself, which basically will try to something which can be automatically fixed. So maybe it's a very simple error which can be automatically done by the okay. Now we have the 6 errors and 5 warnings. So most errors are on the spec files. So we created some empty methods, but that empty methods are not expected. What we can do instead is we can make it as spy methods. Spy anyway we have to use in test cases if you want to observe on the functions and check whether the function is being called or not. So Jasmine is a testing framework we are using here. Using that, so spy basically creates a function which replaces the original function, and it also observes the original function and tell us whether this function has been called or not. So we can use that. For now we are utilizing that to overcome this error, ESLint error. Now the error is reduced, became 4, so that means this can be fixed with that. In initialize, again the same issue, so we'll create the same thing, create spy. and the same goes in header component.spec.ts. Same issue in the home component.spec.ts. Now let's try to run this again. Okay, now we don't have any errors. It's only 5 warnings are there, and here it's saying routes is defined but not used, which is basically the import. Same goes with the home component. OnInt is imported but we haven't used, and same goes with the login component also. We'll try to deploy our application to Firebase. So Firebase has its own options for deployment. It provides a lot of options. Hosting is one of the services. So it provides free hosting, and so we can utilize that. And for that we can utilize the Firebase tool CLI, Firebase CLI, so that from our command line itself we can do the deployment. So I'm just installing that. Earlier when we did with the when we installed the Angular file, it tried to do the same. We tried to install, but it couldn't do that. So we're just trying to do that again. By installing Firebase tool, then we can get all the Firebase commands we can do. So we can just log into Firebase, and then we can select the project, and then we can enable the hosting. We can deploy directly from the command line. So now the installation is completed. Now what the next step we'll do is we'll just set up in here, so it's showing basically Firebase login. So we'll just do the login. So it will just open up a so it will give a link, so sign in link. We need to just log in there. So this is just the analytics. Now this URL I already opened it, and then I have logged in as my current email. Now we need to initialize the Firebase on our project. This is only required if you want to deploy from your local. I mean, if the setup is already, if you want to deploy automatically or something, then you may not even need that here, because we want to do it from our local. So we will init, and what all we need the hosting. I didn't select, so basically we need to press the space bar to select the option. And we will also be utilizing, while hosting, we'll also be utilizing one another feature, Github Actions, for continuous deployment, so that as soon as we push something to the GitHub repo, it will deploy that code to Firebase. So existing project, we just have only one project, so I'll just select that. Public repos directory. So this will be when I am doing the build. When we do the build, finally we'll be getting a compiled file. So that will be our public folder, or basically when we build, we'll be getting a list of static files. So that static files is what we want to finally render, or that is what we want to show it on the page. So that's how the single page application. So whatever we run in local when we do ngserve, that is just a local server which is a node server running on Webpack. We don't need that in the production. In production, it is just the final static files that we are just giving it as a finally we are just entering only that page. There will be one index.html and some JavaScript and CSS files. Okay, now it is saying that the build failed because it is not able to find the Firebase property. Why? Because we added the environment to the environment property, the Firebase config. But this environment file is only for the dev. So for prod, there is an environment.prod.ts. So what we'll do is we'll just move this to a separate file so that this same thing can be used in both the files. So ideally, what we'll do is we'll keep two separate Firebase projects, one for dev and one for prod. Here we're just using the same project for both development as well as for production. And another thing is not a recommended way is we are actually putting all the Firebase configuration in the code base. It's anyway Firebase configuration which will anyway come into our code, but still anything similar to that, it's a good idea. Anything specifically to the project or configurations and all, we can try to put it in some secrets and all. In this case, but again, understand that since it is used finally in the client side project, this will not be a secret because finally anyway who someone seeing the code, they can see it what it is. So we're just using the same Firebase configuration or Firebase project for both development as well as for the production. Now we are trying to do the build again. Build is completed. There is one error on the size. It is saying basically there is a budget and all, but we'll come back to that. So if you see here now, under the dist there is a folder created which is basically the project name, and this is the folder we need to give for our public directory. So we'll give dist slash whatever is that project folder name. Then we need to, it's a single page application, means any URL hitting it should always render the index.html. So we'll put it as yes. Bundles, automatic bundles and deploy, that is where the GitHub Actions will come. We'll come back to the GitHub Actions in a while. Now what we'll do is we'll just create a GitHub repository also so that we can push our changes. So we'll make it as public or private, either you can make. So I'll just copy this repo because basically they wanted a repo to be available given here. Then only they can set up that service account, and then basically they enable all the code actions and all, GitHub Actions. So which branch we need to automatically merge to the production, all those things is basically these questions are being asked. So GitHub Action enables us to run some automatic code when some code actions happen, like someone pushes the code and all. Now Firebase deploy will try. So what will happen is, based on this configuration we have set, Firebase will send or deploy or upload the compiled files or what is there in the build folder or the dist folder to the Firebase, and then there will be a URL also will be generated. So you can see that there is a project console available and there is an URL also available. So this is the URL where our final application is. So currently it is showing the default page. It takes caching, so it will take some time. But that URL now it is hosted successfully. So now if you see here, this is the dashboard where it will show the same URLs. So it will show the domain. So we will look at the GitHub Actions, what it is added here. So GitHub Actions basically automatically there are two actions added by Firebase. We can also create our own. So the actions by default will go to the .github/workflows folder. So you can see that these two things are got generated, one for merging and one for the pull request they have created. So all these files got automatically generated.
So what is the benefit of this one is, so we can test, so for one thing is, before deploying we can review the changes. Another is we can also build, we can test and make sure that no one is breaking the code before we merge the changes to the master. So here we are seeing when to run on push on to the master branch, main branch. So at that time it will basically run, it will do the checkout, then it will do the installation, and it will do the build. So you can see that now I just did a push to the first commit, and now it's already running. So that's why under the action it shows, and it failed also. We'll see what is a failure. So it ran this build and deploy, it did the installation, and then it exceeded because of the same error we got earlier. Basically it's on the budget, like total file size is exceeding the budget which is provided. This is only on the an improvement side. Like if your file size is too much, that means you are doing something wrong. Like we are adding so many unnecessary files maybe, because our project is small, so why would it will have this much size? One major reason it is mentioned here is basically the styles we are using. There is a duplication it is seen, because we are using two themes, and what we are doing is we are just getting all the themes applied. In our case we are just using a few components only. If you look at the duplicate theming, so I'm just looking at the same error. So it is provided that basically if you are doing like a duplication, I mean if you are doing something like two themes, so what we can do is it's basically only on the colors is what the changes. So we'll just say, instead of saying all component themes again, we'll just do only for the colors the change. So the benefit is it won't repeat the same for the both the themes, so there won't be too much duplication. Then we can also do one thing, instead of saying all component themes, we can actually use only for the specific components which we are using. Like we are not utilizing all the components of material. So we can specifically say which are components I want to add. The build is failing again. So what we can do, one thing is we can simply fix it by updating the total budget. So in Angular JSON, the budget values are given. So let's look at the budget. Here it is given the maximum warning and maximum error is given as 1 MB. So in our case it is 1.1 MB. So we'll make it as we'll increase the total size. We'll make it as 2 MB. One more thing we need to do regarding authentication is we want to add some kind of a restriction saying that if the user is not logged in, we should not allow to come to the home page. So it should basically, even if someone tries to come to the home page, it should redirect. For that we normally can use an Auth Guard. We can create our own custom guard. So basically within the route definition we can have like can activate. So there are multiple guards are there, can activate, can deactivate. So basically it will just we are giving a class which will tell whether this that whether we are allowed to enter to the route or not. And in case of Angular Fire, so they're giving that guard already, so we can just reuse that. We don't have to create from our own. So Angular Fire Auth Guard we can utilize. So let's see how they are placing. So there is a can activate, and then we can just give that Fire Auth one. We also want to redirect it to the login page. So for that we need to add some extra changes. So here some example is there for that. So what we want is we want to redirect, if the user is not logged in, we just want to redirect to the login page. So how Angular Firewall takes it is it accepts it as a accepting it as a data. So we can pass a data to any route, any custom data to a route. So here we are just passing whatever is the Auth Guard, and then so in case of home component we want to, so it should be in the home component, so we'll move it as home component, and then data we'll just use the same thing. We'll import the redirect and authorize to. Now if you try to refresh the page, it goes back to the login page. So we didn't automatically login, so using the guard it is redirecting there. Now once we login, we are still coming back here. So the Auth Guard is working. Now what we'll do is we'll try to push these changes also to the repo. Now once we push this one, it should trigger our code action also. It should start building as well. After pushing this route guard changes, you can see that there is an action is being run. So there is something started 6 minutes ago, you can see. And it will basically, so all these are run by the GitHub workflows. It will start that execution. It will try to build it again. So that's what the GitHub code action is. Now we will also want to make sure that no one is able to push directly to the main branch, because basically whatever we are adding to the main branch will get automatically deployed. What we want is instead we want someone to create a pull request. So the workflow should be, you want to do some functionality, create a pull request, create a feature branch and pull request. What we are adding here is we are adding this branch protection so that only if the checks are passing for the peer we are allowing. Try the same. So I just made a small change to the footer. We'll just start to copyright. And now I'll try to push the same to the master branch. So if I try, I'm on the main branch. Now I try to push. Now it will say that it is basically you cannot push that. Right? So we need to create a pull request. So what I will do is I will create a new branch out of the main branch. Now we'll test the whole development workflow. What we'll do is we'll make a small change and we'll try to push the changes. So maybe this login, I'll change it to a button format. So we'll just add a matte flat button. Now once we make the changes, we'll first add and commit. We'll give some message, adding some the login button changes and all. Now we will create a new branch out of the main branch. Now we will create a pull request. So if you see this one, so there is already, it is showing that it is pushed and will create a pull request. We'll just create it. Once we create it, you can see that the checks are already started. This is because of the actions we have written. And we have added that the check branch protection rule so that it has to pass, then only the pull request can be merged. Otherwise, the pull request we cannot merge that. So that is an extra step we are adding. That we added in the branch protection. So it is doing the npm CA, which is nothing but npm installation, and then it is doing the npm run build. Now our build is running. So it is basically once the build is completed, and now it is trying to deploy it also. It is basically not deploying, it is basically creating a live preview deployment. It's a temporary one so that anyone can see that actually. Preview the changes before they merge the changes. Now the checks are all completed. You can see that the green check mark is also there. Now if you look at the pull request, it is showing basically we can, all checks are passed, we can merge also. It also will show a preview URL. So we can actually open it and see. Now you can see that the login is showing the button. But if you look at the original one, it is still the main URL, it is still the old one. So it is just a preview one, which is created by the Firebase. So this also automatically created when we for the code action. Now we will merge it. Once you merge it, what happens? Again, the next guard action will happen, which is basically the deployment one.
With that, we completed our application. We used Angular, Material, and we also used Firebase for authentication, as well as we deployed to the Firebase, and we also automated using the GitHub code action. Hope it was useful. Thanks for watching.